Alright everyone, welcome to our unit here, Slavery in the New World. This is going to be the last lesson in this unit, so we'll get started with that. So our objectives and standards: to analyze the role of African Americans in the New World, and to explain contributions by African Americans to the New World. And take a moment there to read the standards, please. And our desired result. What was the role of African Americans in the New World? So think about that question as we go through here. So slavery in a New World. The primary destination for many Africans was the Caribbean. Agricultural products such as tobacco, cotton, and some sugar cane were set up on huge plantations. You can kind of see a picture of some of that work being done by slaves here in the picture. Now, during the 1640s, sugar plantations expanded the number of slaves because more plantations began to pop up, so more slaves were required for doing the work. And 6,000 slaves in the 1640s grew to 46,000 by 1682, so about 40 years later. There will be a final total of 4 million slaves that will be brought to the Caribbean. So, lives of Caribbean slaves. 10 to 18 hours a day of dangerous work and demanding work. Slaves were also watched by overseers who managed and directed work, and a lot of times they used violence to keep slaves working or to punish slaves. Disease, exhaustion, and the lack of food and medical care were also common for slaves. Punishments such as whippings, burnings, or hangings were used. And in some cases, slaves would resist this by running away. Now, there were also some slave revolts against slavery and their slave owners, but they typically failed. However, there was a successful slave revolt in 1791 in Saint-Domingue, which was successful at ending slavery. So slavery in Latin America. Key destinations for other slaves included mainland Latin America, such as Mexico, Peru, and Brazil. Now, many of these slaves worked in mines or on ranches and plantations. They also labored with sugar, coffee, and cocoa plants. On plantations. That's basically chocolate. The chocolate beans that when you have a candy bar, they were used to pick the beans used for chocolate. Other slaves worked in silver or copper mines as cattle ranchers, loggers, fishers, domestic workers, and merchants in Latin America. So, treatment of slaves. Mexico, Central, and South America passed protective laws that allowed slaves to marry and to prevent the separation of families. The Catholic Church will also encourage owners to free their slaves as well. Now, reading and writing was learned by slaves, so they could be educated, and in some cases, they also purchased their own freedom. However, many slaves were still overworked or mistreated, and slaves often ran away and formed their own communities. So, slavery in British North America. In Jamestown, Virginia, a group of 20 slaves was sold in 1619, okay? This will be one of the first slaves to arrive in Jamestown. Now, many slaves could earn their freedom after a number of years of service. The British colonies are going to rely on indentured servants, which could be white or African American or something else, and these people would work in exchange for passage to the New World. Many indentured servants will work on plantations as domestic servants and as skilled workers. As a result of the indentured system, there was a low need for African slaves. But this would change with the growing need for a permanent labor force, because eventually indentured servants would be set free. So this is going to change in time. So, new ways of slavery. Indentured servants left jobs after their period of service was over, while some others would run away. Others ran away and were hard to find. There was also a shortage in European workers and labor declined. So even in Europe, there's not a lot of indentured servants coming over from Europe anymore. Now, more African slaves were imported, and laws were passed to regulate slavery. My apologies again. In 1641, slavery was legalized in Massachusetts, and slavery was established in all British colonies by 1700. Laws were also set that enslaved people for life, children included as well, and slaves were not allowed to carry weapons and could not travel without permission of the owner. So this is going to establish the beginning of American slavery as we think of it today in the New World. African contributions. There were Africans that explored and helped settle new areas who contributed to the region. Slaves from Africa came with Balboa the explorer and Cortez to the New World, and African crew members planted and harvested crops in the Americas as well. There was also Juan Valente, a West African slave who served as a conquistador and was awarded estates and slaves of his own. A Haitian native, Dusab, founded permanent settlements in the area of Chicago and elsewhere, and free blacks were also helping in settle Louisiana, Virginia, and North Carolina during this time. So the culture of the culture of Africans in the Americas. So music and food, we have a couple of things that came from Africans. We have Angolan slaves helped create Brazilian capoeira, a blend of dance and martial arts. Musical instruments came from Africa, such as the marimba, the banjo, and different types of drums, and New Orleans Creole, which is a blend of African, Caribbean, and European cooking. In terms of religion and language, African slaves blended Christian beliefs with African ones, and we also have Haiti and Louisiana, which have mixed languages because of combining different things, so we have some of that going on in culture as well. Alright, so our closure, what was the role of African Americans in the New World? Think about where they were working and what they were working in. Think of maybe some of the other contributions they added to the New World, and that will help you answer your question for today. Alright, I hope you have a great rest of your day or night. Let me know of any questions or concerns, and I hope to talk to you all soon.